I used to have my students write in journals. I found confessions of love for another classmate, big feelings about their parents, confessions of minor crimes. It was a lot. I even got a recipe once.
Wait, what grade did you teach?
Kindergarten. Oh, hi, I'm Emma. I taught for over 8 years. Now I work with 240 to help teachers pass their certification exams. And today, I'm gonna help you. This video is going to prepare you for the Virginia Communication and Literacy Assessment, which we'll call the VCLA for short. We'll focus specifically on the writing subtest. And this video is gonna cover 3 things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts that will appear on the test, and we'll take a look at a few practice questions. You ready for this? Great, me too. Let's get to it. The VCLA Writing Knowledge and Proficiency Subtest consists of 9 test objectives. The numbering starts with 6 because they pick up where the reading subtest left off. Test objectives 6 through 11 apply to the multiple choice portion of the exam, while 12, 13, and 14 cover the constructed response portion. Expect to complete 40 multiple choice questions, 3 short answer questions, 1 written summary, and 1 written composition. The latter 3 make up that CRQ component. We'll go over these piece by piece, but let's dig into that first chunk a little more. Test objectives 6 through 10 are all covered through multiple choice questions based on passages. Test objective 11 is also based on a passage, but it's kind of its own thing. We'll get into that later. For objectives 6 through 10, expect to see passages around 200 words in length with about 2 or 3 questions linked to each. The questions may be pulled from descriptive statements under any of these objectives. Let's start from the top and discuss each of these in detail. Test Objective 6 is all about understanding the influence of purpose and audience in written communication. You'll need to identify written material targeted toward a specific purpose or audience, such as a letter to a business, and adapt writing for different purposes and audiences. Print carries meaning, and writing has a purpose. There are many different reasons to write, like to entertain, inform, or persuade, to name a basic few. It'll be your job on the exam to determine what the specific reason is. Thankfully, there will be clues inside the passage to help you detect its purpose. We'll have some practice with this later on, but right now, let's see what our next test objective is all about. Test Objective 7 wants to make sure test takers can apply principles of unity, focus, and development in writing. Questions will ask you to recognize examples of well-developed writing, make revisions that improve the unity and focus of a passage, identify portions of a passage that are off-topic, and select supporting material that is consistent with the main idea of a passage. I have some tips for you about revising a passage that I can't wait to share. Reorganize to create a logical flow. Check the writing to ensure that sentences and paragraphs build on each other in the best order. For example, in a chronological text, all information should be in order by date. Also, make sure to remove details that do not support the main idea. For example, a paragraph discussing the invention of the smallpox vaccine might be confused by details about the invention of antibiotics. Remove details that are relevant but distract from the main idea. If the entire paragraph was about sharks as ocean predators, a sentence about the movie Jaws would most likely be an unnecessary supporting detail, even though it seems on topic. I have so many more great tips for you, but my director is telling me I've got to move on. Don't worry, you can find the rest of them in our study guide. The link to subscribe is below. All right, to the next objective we go. Test Objective 8 tests knowledge of applying principles of organization in writing. Expect to recognize effective organization in a passage. Reorganize portions of a passage to achieve an effective sequence of ideas. And identify appropriate transitional words and phrases. Those transitional words and phrases are fun and super important, and I have a great video about them in our study guide. Let's pop in and take a look.
Transition words are words or phrases used to link sentences and ideas together. Transition words carry an implied meaning, so it's important for authors to use appropriate transitions in writing for clarity. For example, by using the transition, "for example," you're cued into the content of the sentence before hearing it. You expect to hear an example of transition words in use. If this sentence had used an inappropriate transition such as "on the other hand" or "in conclusion," the flow would be interrupted.
You can see the rest of that video, including this informative table. I love an informative table. In our study guide, it is full of instructional content in both text and video form, and flashcards and practice questions, including a full-length practice test. And everything is aligned to your exam. Well, it's that time again. Time to see what our next test objective has in store for us. Test objective 9 covers applying principles of sentence and paragraph construction in writing. This is all about recognizing effective topic sentences, recognizing wordiness and redundancy, and identifying sentence fragments and run-on sentences. So make sure you can identify a sentence that is both complete and not too long, and only makes the same point once, not twice, or 3 times, which is pretty redundant of me to say right now. We have strategies for all that in the study guide, but right now, we'll zoom in on what makes an effective topic sentence. Every paragraph in a piece of writing should include a topic sentence to identify the main point of the paragraph. Topic sentences are usually the first sentence in a paragraph, but not always. The other sentences in the paragraph should provide supporting details to the idea presented in the topic sentence. The topic sentence shouldn't be too general or specific. However, it should be specific enough that the reader understands the main idea of the paragraph. Ooh, let me give you an example of a topic sentence right now. Test Objective 10 is all about the application of correct usage in standard English. See how I did that? That's a good topic sentence. You'll need to recognize the standard use of verbs, including subject-verb agreement and verb tense. Recognize the standard use of pronouns, including pronoun antecedent agreement and the use of possessive pronouns, just to name a couple. Recognize the standard use of modifiers like adverbs, adjectives, comparatives, and superlatives. And recognize the correct use of commonly misused words. I don't know why these subjects and verbs and pronouns and antecedents keep struggling to agree. Can't we all just get along? Let's talk more about subject-verb agreement. Subject-verb agreement refers to the agreement in number between subjects and verbs. In other words, if the subject of a sentence is singular, the verb should also be singular. You gotta make the numbers match. Take the sentence, Therese run to the slide, as an example. Therese is one person, so the subject is singular. This means we also need a singular verb. Therese runs to the slide has proper subject-verb agreement. I think we should make our way to our next test objective. Do you agree? For test objective 11, you'll need to apply knowledge of mechanical conventions in standard English. This covers your punctuation, capitalization, and spelling rules. These questions will be passage-based also, but they'll look a little different from what we've seen so far. You'll see a passage and then around 5 questions about it. Each question will ask you to take a close look at a sentence from the passage to identify an error. The errors will be in the mechanical conventions of standard English that we just discussed, or there might not be an error at all. But you'll have to know your mechanical conventions rules to be able to tell. Now, knowing all the punctuation, capitalization, and spelling rules in the whole English language might seem like a lot, because it is, but we have the most essential rules to know, plus practice questions in our study guide. Remember, you can check it out with the link below. But before we move into the next test objective, let's go over one of the conventions of standard English that is easiest to be confused about, the comma. We'll discuss the dreaded comma splice. 2 independent clauses cannot be joined with just a comma. This creates a comma splice. I tried to finish reading the book, comma, I was interrupted by a phone call, is not correct. I tried to finish reading the book, comma, but I was interrupted by a phone call. Now the comma works since it's in front of a coordinating conjunction. The first 3 examples are all ways to properly punctuate the 2 independent clauses. She went to buy a new pair of running shoes. The store didn't have her size. Using just a comma will not work. Here are examples of how he spent hours preparing a gourmet meal for his family. They devoured it in 15 minutes can be punctuated. Sticking a lone comma between the 2 independent clauses results in a comma splice. It's incorrect any way you splice it. However, you will like hearing the news that we've made it through all of our multiple choice test objectives. We'll see some practice questions at the end, but right now, let's find out what the CRQs are all about. For test objective 12, you'll get 3 short answer questions. Each one asks you to rewrite a sentence. Each sentence will have 2 errors in it. It's your job to find the errors and rewrite the sentence correctly. And be careful not to change the meaning of the sentence or introduce any new errors. The errors will be in grammar, usage, construction, spelling, capitalization, or punctuation. So you can use your knowledge from the other areas that we've talked about here. You just won't get any choices. You'll have to write it the correct way on your own. Now it's time to talk about Objective 13, the written summary, in which you summarize a given passage in your own words. The passage you're given will likely be an informational text. Your task is to read the passage and write a summary of 150 to 200 words. You should plan to spend about 45 minutes on this question. Your summary should convey the main idea and key points from the text. It's important to write it in your own words. You're probably familiar with summarizing. To plan your response, I recommend jotting down what you think the main idea of the passage is, then making a list of key details under it. Be sure to consider which details are not that important and can be omitted, because summarizing is about recognizing the most important points. We don't have time to go through a practice summary in this video, but the 240 Study Guide includes 3 passages for you to practice on, with sample responses to review. We made it to the last section, Test Objective 14. This is the written composition, where you'll take a position on a given topic and write a persuasive essay. You'll be given an argumentative essay topic relating to education, along with a brief summary of both sides of the issue. Then you will produce an essay of 300 to 600 words in which you choose one of the sides and use evidence and details to support your position. This one should also take you about 45 minutes. A big tip here is to spend a little extra time on your thesis statement. Your thesis should clearly state whether you are for or against the topic that you're presented with. Do not take a neutral stance. Don't worry, you won't be graded on which side you take, just on how well you organize and communicate your ideas. This statement should also briefly introduce the 2 or 3 reasons, or they might be called rationales, that support your position. I'll show you an example in a second. Then each body paragraph will focus on one of those rationales you gave in your thesis. Your reasons can be points that were made in the argument given in the prompt, or your own ideas. You can support each reason with examples from your own life, or prior knowledge that you have about the topic. Okay, let's do a practice composition together right now. Here we have a prompt about school uniforms for middle school students. Check out the summary of the argument for mandating uniforms and the argument against it. Now we need to pick a side. There's no right answer, so for today, let's be against mandating uniforms. School uniforms should not be mandated in a middle school because they hinder students' freedom of expression and affect their self-image. Remember how important it is to write a strong thesis statement. Here's a good example. Notice that I clearly state the side I'm taking, and I'm introducing 2 rationales to support my position. Now I'll use that thesis statement to write a full response. Here's a strong response. It's organized and focused. Remember those 2 rationales I gave in the thesis statement? Each one became the focus of a body paragraph. And don't forget to leave a few minutes at the end to check your work for things like grammar and punctuation. That's it. Now you're set to maintain your composure while writing your composition. And if you want more practice, be sure to check out the prompts we have ready for you in the 240 Study Guide. There you have it. You've learned about all the test objectives on this exam. But before we say goodbye, let's see some of those practice multiple choice questions I promised you in the beginning. We'll start with a passage and then answer a few questions about it, just like you'll need to do on your exam. Charles Cooley was an American sociologist who lived from 1864 to 1929. He is best known for his concept of the looking glass self, which suggests that our sense of self is shaped by our perceptions of how others see us. According to Cooley, we imagine how we appear to others and then use those imagined perceptions to form our own self-concept. He believed that the looking glass self begins in childhood, as children begin to develop a sense of self through interactions with their parents and other significant adults. Then, as we grow and interact with more people, our sense of self becomes more complex and nuanced. Cooley was also a proponent of symbolic interactionism, a sociological perspective that emphasizes the role of symbols and social interactions in shaping human behavior. He believed that society is blank, a static entity, blank, a dynamic process shaped by the ongoing interactions between individuals. Cooley's ideas were influential in the development of modern sociological theory. His work remains relevant today in understanding how social relationships and interactions shape our individual identities and social structures. Let's see one of those writing purpose questions we discussed back in Test Objective 6. The writer presents the material in the passage in a way that is most consistent with which of the following purposes? A. To persuade readers to support a specific sociological perspective. B. To assess the strengths and weaknesses of a sociological perspective. C. To explain the most prominent beliefs of a well-known sociologist. D. To challenge the ideas of an American sociologist. Choice C is the one we want. The passage introduces a sociologist, Charles Cooley, and discusses his concept of the looking glass self and his support of symbolic interactionism. The author is explaining, not persuading, assessing, or challenging. Okay, good. We get to fill in the blanks from our passage for our next one. Which of the following words or phrases, if inserted in order into the blanks in sentence 7, would best complete the sentence? A, not only, but also. B, not, but rather. C, neither, nor. D, either, or. Choice B is best. The words not and but rather, when used together in the same sentence, show contrast. This sentence is showing contrast between two different things, a static entity and a dynamic process. All right, one more for this passage. Which sentence, if added after sentence 3, would best support the main idea of the first paragraph? A. This idea can be well encapsulated in Cooley's famous quote, "I am not who you think I am not who I think I am who I think you think I am." B. Cooley's perspectives have also faced some criticisms and limitations. C. In addition, Cooley believed that primary groups were crucial for the socialization process and the development of a sense of self. D. Cooley's work on primary groups also contributed to the development of later theories on small group dynamics and the importance of social support networks in mental health and well-being. The first choice is the best choice in this case. The first paragraph focuses on Cooley's concept of the looking glass self, which is the idea that people base their sense of self on how others view them. This idea is clearly supported by the quote, "I am not who you think I am not who I think I am who I think you think I am." Okay, let's see one of those English language conventions questions that asks us to make a revision to correct the sentence. The sentence will come from a passage, but I'm not going to read the whole thing for you this time. We'll just focus on one sentence from the passage. And if you spot some errors in the rest of the passage, good job. They're supposed to be there. You can consider that extra practice. Between 6 and 2 million years ago, some hominids began to walk upright and use simple tools, and their brain size was slightly larger than before. A, spelling error, B, punctuation error, C, capitalization error, or D, sentence correct. This sentence from the passage has a spelling error. Then should be spelled than because it's being used to compare two things. Then and than are commonly confused words. You gotta know when to use each so they don't turn into spelling errors. And that's it. You finished the video. I hope it was helpful. Did you know that thousands of teachers have used 240 to help them pass this exam? If you really want to make sure you're prepared for the VCLA Writing Subtest, take the next step and subscribe to the 240 Study Guide. It has instructional content in text and video form so you can decide how you want to prepare. It's test aligned so you know precisely what you need to study. And it has plenty of practice questions so you can be sure you're ready. I can tell you're going to make a great teacher. Let's get you ready for your certification exams. Click the link below right now to get started. But they're going to get a kick out of reading those student journals.